Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We are expecting quite a few people to jump on today, so we're going to go ahead and get started. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, welcome to our webinar on implementing a bill payment assistance program. This is the fourth of several webinars that we've done on water affordability, and we encourage you to go and check out those previous webinars on our efcnetwork.org website. We've covered affordability tools, among other things that might be of use to you. My name is Tess Clark from the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. In a moment, I'll turn things over to Elsa Marie Mullins from the University of North Carolina. But first, we just want to cover a few logistics. Everyone will be on mute to ensure audio quality, as you all already know. Please use our question dialog box to ask any questions or to submit your comments or thoughts throughout the session. We will be checking those and saving time for questions at the end. You will receive a follow-up email from us that includes a link to all the materials and any other information that you might need from today. PDFs of our presentation materials are also available to you now if you simply click the Handouts tab on the GoToWebinar panel. You can just go ahead and download the PDF if you'd like to follow along that way or to share it with others. This training hasn't been pre-approved for any kind of PDH or CEU credit. However, we will provide certificates as a courtesy. We can't guarantee that the training will receive pre-approval or that the training will meet specific requirements, but to receive one, just be sure that you attend the entire session and participate in poll questions as needed, and you must be registered using your real name and a unique email address. Again, can't make any promises, but happy to supply you with a PDH certificate to help you save for your own records. Now for a little bit about the Environmental Finance Center Network. Through training and technical assistance services, we help water and wastewater systems achieve their goals and stay in compliance with safe and clean water regulations. As part of this work, we offer free professional technical assistance services to small systems, and we will share a link to the chat, to our assistance form in the chat shortly, so stay tuned for that. And here you can see our various centers that make up our network. You can see that our centers and partner organizations are spread across the country. We work together to create solutions to difficult how-to-pay issues of environmental protection and improvement, and take note of a center near you or in your region, as those folks are ready and willing to help you on most of your technical needs in terms of water and wastewater. And on that note, I'd like to turn things over to Elsa Marie Mullins from the University of North Carolina. Elsa Marie, take it away.
Thanks, Tess. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Can you see it, Tess?
Yes, looks good.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for this. This is the last webinar in this series of community affordability. Special thanks to those who have joined us for all of them. As Tess said, I'm Elsa Marie Mullins, and I'm a project director at the Region 4 Environmental Finance Center, which is Southeast US. And as part of my work there, I do direct technical assistance, help small systems all over the country. I do a lot of rates, talking about affordability, looking at financial health, and various other things. And then I also do applied research. Apologize in advance. I'm a little bit sick today, so I might cough sometimes. But part of what we'll be talking about today are customer assistance programs, and some of my work doing applied research is what is informing some of this conversation, as well as a lot of work a lot of other people have done. So today we're going to be focusing on implementing a customer assistance program. It's a tough subject. A lot of people think that, you know, a customer assistance program might be this like silver bullet kind of solution to affordability. You know, if you have folks that can't pay, well, if you have a way that they can get money to pay their bills, then you're good to go. But it really needs to be part of, you know, one solution in a suite of solutions, and we'll talk about that why that is in this webinar. But first, a quick overview of where we've been over the last couple webinars. We've talked about the balancing act, that a utility needs to generate revenue in order to be financially sustainable, and yet there will always be some citizens, some of your service population who can't pay. So the first webinar we talked about understanding affordability, and these are all linked to the recordings. And we looked at 2 different tools to measure affordability. The second webinar, colleagues at Wichita State University talked about customer empathy, how to be aware of how your rates impact customers and kind of what might be going on in their lives. And then last time I talked about how rate structure design and then policies can be a way to address affordability. As you set your rate setting objectives as a utility, you could incorporate affordability into that, and I kind of demonstrated how that, what that can look like in a couple different ways in that last webinar. As I've mentioned, this is not one answer, kind of one solution issue. When we talk about affordability, it's not just about the assistance programs, but also things like fines and fees for non-payments, how you go about your billing collections, a lot of different things. So today we're going to focus on assistance programs and assistance funding. And we're going to do that by looking at the why, the what, how to fund them, and then the implementation as well. So first off, why have a customer assistance program? And just kind of put that up there. CAP stands for CAP, Customer Assistance Program, and I'll be using CAP a lot, or Customer Assistance Program interchangeably throughout the webinar. So first off, why have a CAP? A lot of similar reasons to caring about affordability. At the end of the day, the utility needs to meet its revenue requirement to provide clean water and protect public health. And then there will be folks who have a hard time paying. So part of what a CAP can do is help a utility avoid maintaining low rates. Because if you have a CAP, you can help the folks who really can't pay, and that takes a little bit of pressure off the rates. Of course, that's not going to solve the issue for everyone. But I just want to make clear, as I did in the last webinar, that keeping your rates low because you think that's the best way to make sure everybody can pay your rates is not going to be a financially sustainable for the utility in the future, and it's going to lead to either massive increases or endangering public health, or both. And so, providing people dirty water isn't actually going to help them in the long run. And so it's this balancing act. And some folks might even say, I talked to somebody who's trying to kind of separate out the concept of affordability and rates to say, okay, we need to set our rates to talk about revenue requirement, what we need to make to invest in our system. And affordability is a conversation about the people that can't pay. And that will always be a reality. And so it can be incorporated into the rates conversation, or it can be a separate conversation. This quote from a CAPS overview that the EPA did in 2016 says, in every community in the US, some households inevitably have difficulty paying water and wastewater bills. The relative number might be large or small, but there are always some that find public utility service unaffordable. And this is going to be true whether the community as a whole is wealthy or poor, whether the average cost of service is high or low, or whether the utility's collections policy is strict or lax. And that's very true. There's always going to be people who can't pay. It is also true that things like considering the community as a whole, considering the cost of service, considering your collections policies, all of those things can be part of a holistic picture to assist customers who have a hard time paying. And a customer assistance program can be part of that as well. We kind of want to look at this as multiple solutions for multiple different types, parts of this issue. It's not going to be a one size fits all. So another couple additional reasons to have a customer assistance program. One is to improve revenue stability if it helps folks pay more regularly. Say you have a bill discount program, even if folks are only paying 50% of what they would otherwise, if they're still paying every month, you know you're getting that 50% every month. So that can be good for both utility and customer. It can avoid the costs and pain of collecting on debts, disconnection, reconnecting. If you can, through a customer assistance program, helps folks stay current on their bills, and also communicates positively to a customer of what the priorities of the utility and the elected officials are in your town. So that's kind of some of the framework why I'm assuming if you're at this webinar, then you have some of these reasons. And we're going to go over kind of what a customer assistance program can look like. It's not just bill payment assistance. So I'm going to go through kind of some different examples of customer assistance programs, and then the categories, kind of some pros and cons and examples for each of these kinds of customer assistance programs. So a lifeline rate, bill discount, flexible terms, temporary assistance, and water efficiency. All of these are listed in that EPA report as well. The first one is a lifeline rate, which I have as kind of an analogy to this consumption allowance in a rate structure. So it's customers may pay a reduced rate for an allotted amount of water to meet their basic needs. So a utility might say, you know, we think it's reasonable and average usage is such that a customer might need, you know, 3,000 gallons a month. For that, you're only going to be paying $12 or whatever it is. And you can have this where somebody opts into it, or it's just across the board. Some pros is that it's easy to implement across an entire service population. It encourages conservation because there's a strong incentive to stay within that consumption allowance or that lifeline amount. Some cons, if there's no application to opt in, then it might benefit more customers than actually need it. And if you have a large low income household, they might need more consumption than just that lifeline amount. An example is in Texas, Corsicana, where their application, you have to apply, and it's only for senior citizens. So it has to be 65, you have to be 65 or over, and you get 2,000 gallons. And then you also have a reduced street improvement fee. And government units often do kind of mix and match this. So you can do it for water, but you can also do it if you provide electricity or solid waste or other services. You know, thinking about more than just the water wastewater bill is good too. Next up, we have bill discount. So this is, the discounts are just straight up reduced. And this can be long-term or it can be short-term, and they can be applied to any part of the bill. So one of the pros of that is that you can apply it to the fixed charge or the variable charge or your stormwater charge or whatever charge it is. You can also target it to a specific population. You have to kind of, if you apply and opt into the bill discount. And some cons is that it may be needed to be calculated each month, and then that's another like administrative burden that can be done easily as well. And you just want to make sure that this is legal in your state as well. One example is California Water Services Customer Assistance Program. And to be eligible for it, you have to have an annual income below the threshold. It's listed there in the bottom right. And this is a 50% discount. The next one is a flexible terms. This can also be called payment plans, but it's changing in some way the terms of bill payment in a way that helps the customer. Oftentimes that's determining, helping a customer determining when their bill is due. So an example of this is lining up a bill with Social Security payments for senior citizens, for example, and levelized billing is another example. We'll go into that. some of the benefits of flexible terms are that you can provide that flexibility to a customer without actually writing off any of your collections. But some of the cons are that it can be administratively burdensome. We saw this in North Carolina after our executive order lifted that had been prohibiting disconnections for non-payments for residential customers during COVID. Part of the executive order required utilities to provide a payment plan, and especially for a lot of small utilities, but also for the really large ones, it was a big administrative burden in order to provide those payment plans, especially if they weren't able to do it within their billing system. So just making sure that there's a way to do this if you have a lot of people that you plan to enroll in a flexible terms plan is key. One example of this is Huntsville, Alabama. They do levelized billing, so it takes your average payment based on the last 12 months. And in Huntsville, they do electricity and natural gas as well. And so, there's a lot of seasonality to utility usage, and levelized billing can make sure that that kind of moderates those fluctuations. So if someone needs to pay a lot one month or little another month, it makes it easier to budget if it's levelized. So that's one example of flexible terms, and it can look a whole lot different in a whole lot of ways. Sometimes it's if somebody has a one-time really large payment due, then maybe they pay an extra $10 a month for the next year instead of making that $120 payment right then, or whatever it is. So it can look different depending on the needs of the utility and the customer. There's also temporary assistance. This category encompasses what we often think about as bill payment assistance, and it's focused on short-term assistance or one-time kind of help for customers who are in need. And these kinds of programs can provide significant assistance to prevent disconnection for customers. If they have a large bill, they can apply for funding and get it, and then apply it to their bill, and then it goes away and they don't need to pay it. It can also be administratively burdensome, especially if there are a lot of eligibility requirements, and oftentimes they're underfunded, so there's not enough funds to provide assistance for all the customers who would apply. And then, this may not provide for the customers that really need some kind of ongoing assistance that isn't going to be provided by a once-a-year benefit. But one example of this is in Fort Collins, Colorado. To be eligible for it, you have to be at risk for disconnection, and it's only available once every 12 months. And again, this can look like a lot of different things. Finally, the last one is water efficiency. So this is where utilities will help work on, minimizing the bill at all, which helps low-income customers as well, through funding their water efficiency measures. So a lot of times this looks like rebates on water-efficient toilets or appliances, assisting with leak repairs. If you get for example, you had a leak, you get it repaired, you show proof of repair to the utility. They might adjust your leak, they might remove it altogether, or only charge you 50% of the water that was part of that leak, or whatever it is, with that kind of display that there's been some action to mitigate the leak. So some benefits of this is that it encourages conservation. It can be kind of a form of long-term bill reduction. A con can be administratively burdensome, and it can only reduce the bill so much. It can do a bit, but at the end of the day, they're still going to have a bill. One example of this is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So if a customer purchases a high efficiency toilet, then 25% of that toilet will be paid for by the Public Works Commission. it is up to $75 per toilet. So a program like that helps. It's kind of an investment from the utilities standpoint for long-term bill reduction and water conservation. So now that you've kind of seen the categories that were in that report and are kind of the big buckets that we put customer assistance program in, I'd love for Tessa to launch the first poll and hear from all of you if you have a CAP, and if so, what kind?
Yeah, so please go ahead and review those options that are listed. So you can choose between a lifeline rate, a bill discount, temporary assistance, water efficiency, or if you do something else, you can go ahead and type that into the questions box if you do. We'll give you a few more seconds to respond here, and I'll just close it once I see we're maybe at like 35, 40%. Okay, great. So it looks like people are responding, giving it some thought. I'm going to close this in 3 seconds. So 3, 2, last chance to participate, and 1. And here are the results. So there's quite a few others that have been entered into the chat. Yeah,
I think Tessa, those might have been from folks that don't have one.
Just go ahead and close this. 1 second.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting that, you know, the highest response was temporary assistance, which is kind of that bill payment that we were just talking about. But that's often what's seen as kind of the typical customer assistance program. And then 23% had bill discount and 17% for water efficiency. So quite a spread. And many utilities have more than one customer assistance program, which is great because it can meet different needs for different customers. One thing I wanted to kind of show in this webinar and kind of say is, you know, as we talk about customer assistance programs and funding them and then implementing them, there's still there's just a lot that is not known about best practices, a lot that's just individual for utilities. There's a lot of questions about what can you do in my state and what's legal, and you know, we're still definitely in terms of a research field still just scratching the surface. There's a lot of work out there on affordability and kind of the framework for things, but in terms of the nuts and bolts of what makes a customer assistance program work for different utilities in different places, we're still working on that, and that's a research question I'm very interested in. If you'd like, there's this water assistance programs website that colleagues of ours at Washington State University, Joe Cook, and students have made this website, and I liked it here, waterassistanceprograms.org. And it goes through, and they kind of looked at a lot of different large utilities across the US, and they surveyed 383, and more than half of them had a customer assistance program. And from those, you know, the biggest one at this 45% was bill discount, and then flexible terms at 30%, that temporary assistance was at 20%, water efficiency was 5.2%, and that lifeline rate was at 1.2%, I think. So that just kind of gives you an idea of some of the especially larger utilities across the US, and what kind of customer assistance programs are out there. So feel free to go check out that website. It's in the handout in the slides, and I can put it in the chat later too. But that's a way you can kind of browse by state and look at what else is in your state, and look at different websites for different programs and kind of learn from what your neighbors are doing. So that's kind of the overview of what counts as a customer assistance program. As you can see, there's a huge variety. And now we're going to go into how to fund a customer assistance program. So here at the UNC EFC, we have a tagline, how you pay for it matters. How is your customer assistance program funded? it matters. Some of the options, one of the big things is that it will definitely depend on the program. So if your program is primarily flexible terms, then you may not need an extra source of revenue in order to fund that program. It may just be an hour or two, or 5 to 10 hours, or some amount of time for a customer service rep or a billing clerk to do that. So you may not need kind of an extra pot of money to fund a flexible term customer assistance program. Whereas if you're doing a temporary assistance program and providing funds directly to customers, then you likely will need an extra and set aside pot of money for funding that program. So in general, it depends on the customer assistance program, but there are 5 different options. One is rate revenue from the utility, so just general revenue from your rates. The second is non-rate revenue. I'll go into that a little bit more later, but that can look like things like interest, or your water leases from cell companies on your water towers, various things like that. Your general fund revenue, especially if you're a municipal unit, a government unit that is providing utility services, and you can sometimes use general fund monies for a customer assistance program, and then donations and state or federal funds. We'll go into each of these. First off, I want to talk about rate revenue. And in 2017, colleagues from the UNC EFC, as well as a lot of other folks, published this Navigating Legal Pathways to Rate-Funded Customer Assistance Programs document. And this goes through each of the 50 states, as well as Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, and looks at the legal language for using rate revenue specifically for customer assistance programs. And they found that few states actually explicitly authorize CAP programs, although they don't always prohibit them. Home rule is something that, if a local government can decide to put a special tax, sales tax, or whatever it is in their jurisdiction, that has allowed some local development of CAPs. In some states, of course, if there's a no home rule state, then that's not possible. And then there's just a lot of differences and limitations for public versus private utilities, as well as commission and non-commission regulated utilities. And it doesn't always line up which utilities are public and regulated, or private or regulated, or public or not regulated, or whatever it is. So I really encourage you to check out this report for your specific state. We don't have time to look at all of the states. Well, I'll show you the graphic, but you'll be able to tell more of the context of what's in your state. You can start with this report, and then you can always contact us at the EFC or EFC network to look at examples in your specific state of funding customer assistance programs, and looking at kind of the legal pathways to doing so in your state. So there are 3 different kind of approaches highlighted in this report. One is that policy should change to allow customer assistance programs at state and local levels. In some places like North Carolina, it would take advocacy at the state level in order to do that. Secondly, utilities should develop sound reasoning for the legality of their customer assistance program. So making sure that both for the implementation of the program, but also for the funding of the program, you want to make sure that it's legal where you are. Or you can make a customer assistance program that doesn't rely on customer rate revenues, and that's where a lot of utilities have landed. So we'll talk about that as well. But these are kind of the 2 summary charts. This is the commission regulated utilities. The dark green color, the legal language explicitly authorizes the use of ratepayer revenues for customer assistance programs. And oftentimes, in general, a lot of the commission regulated utilities are the investor owned private utilities. So that's not true all the way across the board, but just in general. The light green is no express authority, the yellow is some potential challenges, and the red is specifically prohibited. So you can see most of the states, there are potential challenges with the language in terms of the commission regulated utilities. For non-commission regulated utilities and the ability to implement the customer assistance programs by ratepayer revenue, it's mostly split between no express authority and some potential challenges. And so, there's just a lot of gray area. I'd say, additionally, sometimes the non-rate revenue kind of varies state by state. In some states, something like a lease on your water tower would be, like revenue from that would be non-rate revenue, and that would be legal, but in other states it might not. So this is really a case to check with your local attorney in terms of what they are comfortable with using, what kind of revenue they're comfortable with using for customer assistance programs, if any revenue at all. As you're thinking about funding customer assistance programs as well, we have a tool that can be helpful for estimating those, for that kind of the amount needed for customer assistance programs. So this bill payment assistance programs cost estimation tool takes census data, and we can do that for as large as your service area is, basically, for lots of different census blocks or census designated places or counties or whatever it is. And then puts in a lot of different parameters, such as how many of the eligible population might be enrolling in the program, what your benefit level will be, those sorts of things, and kind of give you an estimate of how much you would need to fund a program based on those parameters. And so I can link that tool in the chat. It's also linked in the PowerPoint, but feel free to contact us if you want any help with that as well. One of the most popular ways to fund a customer assistance program is through donations. I have an example here from the town of Elkin I'll go into more later, but something like a utility donation fund to help each other. Some utilities like to round up, so say, round your bill to the nearest dollar. That can be difficult when there's, for example, a rate structure change or a rate change. I've seen utilities, their donations went way down when their rate structure changed, so that people that had been using 4,000 gallons were at like a 35-cent mark, so they were rounding up from 35 cents, and then it started rounding up from 90 cents, so their donations went down. So, rounding up seems like a simple way to do it, but a flat donation program might be easier to kind of incorporate that into the bill. Just say, every billing cycle, add $1 donation to this utility donation fund. We probably need a separate accounting for the donation pot of money. And then also, I just want to throw out there that I've heard of, and talked to utilities that have been successful with soliciting donations from nonprofits and businesses, as well as private citizens. Sometimes there are just citizens that really want to donate. Sometimes there's a church that really wants to donate. It can look different at different places. So I'd say look beyond just your service population too, if you're really trying to drum up interest in a donation program. And then funding at the state and federal level. States vary greatly. California has set up some ongoing funds, but other than that, I'm not aware of a more permanent program elsewhere. But feel free to let me know in the chat if there's one in your state that I haven't mentioned. And then nationwide, the low-income household water assistance program was funded once, but that was tied to COVID dollars, and it's to be determined whether or not more sustainable funding will come from that or not. So I'd say don't count on funding from other sources. as well. But you can also always lobby for it for your state and federal levels. So time for the next poll. Right now, how do you fund your customer assistance program if you have one?
I'm sorry, do I have the wrong one up?
I think it's okay.
Okay, sorry about that. We'll just switch them. We'll give you a few more seconds to respond here. And I'll close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. So again, since a lot of folks don't have a cap yet on the call, most of the responses are for NA.
Yeah, but I see it's pretty evenly split between general fund donations and rate revenue for the other ones. So I'd love to know which states y'all who are funding from rate revenue kind of are from. But the general fund is really a common one as well, especially in North Carolina for funding your customer assistance program, because it's a pretty known source of revenue. It's coming, and it'll be there. Okay, so the next poll is similar. It's how would you fund your customer assistance program? Regardless of what you're doing, what kind of be your ideal? And we can give them a little less time on this one, Tess.
Okay, and this one, just ignore what it, respond as if how you would fund it, not how do you fund it, since I messed that up a little bit, guys, sorry. And I'll close the poll in about 5 seconds. So a few more seconds to respond, and I'm closing the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Here we go.
Okay, interesting. So I see there's about 36% donations is the biggest one, and then rate revenue is after that. So yeah, the preference would be for getting donations from the community for those customer assistance programs, and then 18% were general fund and 11% was non-rate revenue. Awesome. Well, thank you all for participating.
Elsamore, you might need to reshare your screen.
Do you see it now?
Yeah, you're going to want to reverse the display settings. Seems like it disconnected briefly.
Okay, there we go. Are we good now, Tess? Okay.
Yes, all good.
Awesome. So we've talked a bit about why have a customer assistance program, what they are, some funding options, and we're going to go into some implementation ideas now. So the meat of implementing a customer assistance program. I first want to kind of pause before we dive into all of the ideas and say I'm going to throw out a lot of different ideas and possibilities, and no one person, no one utility can do all of it. So I encourage you just to start somewhere, maybe start with just that window. And then you can always look back, look around, ask for ideas if you want to do more. As you refine, as you evaluate and figure out what works and what doesn't work. I just want to say, kind of keep your expectations reasonable, especially if this is your first time thinking about a customer assistance program. It can be really hard to get them started, hard to get people on board. And so kind of as you get started, try to define kind of a reasonable goal first. That's my first kind of guideline. Know what you want to do with it. And that's going to determine, just like with rate setting objectives, knowing what your rate setting objectives are help you determine what your rate structure should be and your rates. Setting your goals for your customer assistance program will outline what you want to do and how Say you really want to make sure your senior citizens aren't paying too much for water or are able to afford their water, then you would target your eligibility guidelines for senior citizens. So just make sure your goal is clear, and then you'll be able to have something to evaluate against when you go to evaluate your program. Secondly, see how your policies align with your customer assistance program goal. So not just your eligibility and benefit guidelines for your customer assistance program, but also your other policies across the utility. So say you really want your customers, one of your goals is to help the customers who are, get disconnected multiple times a year to stay connected to their water service. Well, if some of your policies say you have a really high disconnection reconnection fee, and your customer assistance program doesn't, like your amount of assistance for temporary assistance doesn't even cover that, or say you want to help those who are get disconnected many times a year, but they can only get help from the program once a year, I would say evaluate all of the policies as you're looking at those goals, because just one program isn't necessarily going to help that. For the program itself, write down the policies for the program. I've talked to a lot of utilities, especially smaller ones, that say, oh, people just call and we talk about it. Which, it can be really nice to have that personal touch, but if you don't have any policies saying, okay, these are the flexible terms that we offer, this is the temporary assistance that we offer, this is how we determine if somebody's eligible or not, then it's really it can be tricky to point back and say, okay, this is what's guiding our principles here. So I really encourage you to write them down, even if some of it is, decided by this committee or whatever it is. Just make sure that process is transparent and consistent so that it's fair for every customer that's coming for help. And finally, make sure you check with your local attorney, as I've said before, that whatever you're proposing is legal. So one of the first steps in implementing a customer assistance program is customer engagement. So however informal it is, whether that's a survey for all of your customers via mail, online, or phone, it can also look like informal conversations. A customer service rep talking to somebody who's been disconnected for the third time that year, saying, okay, what would actually help you here? What could be done that would be helpful? And get some of that feedback so that can guide what you're doing. You can also ask your community organizations, your local nonprofits, your Department of Human Health and Services, any organization that helps with rental assistance or food or other basic needs. Go to those places and ask them, do people need help with their utility bills? We see them getting disconnected. How do you think we should help? What do you think would be helpful? So again, however informal that feedback happens, building those relationships both with your customers and your community organizations is just going to help you down the road, as well as kind of set up your customer assistance program kind of goals for what would be actually appropriate. So once you kind of determine what you're going to do, you want to also get the word out. So the biggest one here is working with your local organizations, your nonprofits, the places people go when they need help. Because if they can go to one place to get help with their rent and their food and their utility bill, they're going to go there over needing to go to several different places. Also, if it's just the Department of Health and Human Services, try to look for other places too, because many times customers can be wary of the government. So if they're not going to show up to your utility office or the Department of Health and Human Services, well, they might go to that church down the road. So again, just try to work with as many people as possible. When you're talking about the utility, the customer assistance program, you want multiple modes of communications to say, hey, here's how you enroll. You want to mail. Tariff postcards was successful in one place. Making sure your website is mobile friendly, social media, posting information around, and making sure it's multilingual if appropriate. Especially if most of your customer service population, if everyone speaks English, then you may not need to have another language. But if you know that there are folks that don't speak English in your service population, then make sure that that there are multilingual signs if needed. The video here is not going to work, and we don't really have time anyway, but you can go back and look at this video, which kind of gets the word out about a roundup program. But what I wanted to say about this is that the customer service director who helped make this video, she said, you know, the benefit of this video, it not only got the word out because we now had a cool video on our website, but it made everybody who was involved in making the video more excited about the program and talk to their friends about, oh, I just filmed this today because we have now a donation program. And so any way to get the word out is great. For the actual application process, again, work with local organizations. So different utilities do it differently. Some do it in-house. Many utilities partner with local DHS or some other kind of organization that is providing assistance to citizens to fill out applications to be enrolled in a utility assistance program and a customer assistance program. So, you know, again, there are lots of options. You have to decide how that relationship should be. You know, decide making sure there are different options for applying, and then one of the barriers that's been cited as making it hard to enroll in a customer assistance program is having to do income verification or requiring social security number. So the easier you make it, the more likely it is you'll get a higher enrollment. Although it can still be challenging to get the word out too. But you have to determine, you know, what your utility is comfortable with and what's legal and all of that as well. And in terms of eligibility, again, I just want to emphasize, know what's legal. You know, in your state, is it like in North Carolina, the authority for the government is limited to low to moderate income citizens and senior citizens. So like units can't just give out temporary assistance funds to anyone. And determine things like thinking about when can somebody enroll in a customer assistance program? Is it just when their bill is past due? Is it when their water is disconnected? Again, the less restrictive it is, the easier it'll be. And then when you look at income level, you can use federal poverty level, you can look at area household income, and again, kind of there are many different ways to do this, and you have to decide what you think is best for your utility. And then a way to make it easier is also to use categorical eligibility. So saying a lot of LIWAP programs did this, saying that if you're already enrolled in SNAP or EBT benefits, then you're automatically enrolled in this. We already know you're at the income level where you'd be eligible, so we're just going to loop you in. That can make it easier. And then again, this can be guided by your goals as a utility, is looking at the implementation benefit levels. So when you say, okay, we're going to give, say we're offering temporary assistance, we're going to give $100 twice a year to somebody who applies. Well, what would that $100 actually cover? What's your average delinquent bill? Are you shooting for so many months of payment? Do you want to just cover all of anyone's bill? And when you're thinking about this, you want to think about how many customers you hope to assist and what your funding levels are. So maybe that $100 is just because, hey, we want to help a lot of people and we don't have that much, we don't have that much money. Or it's, we want to help the few people a lot, so our level's higher, or whatever it is. But it's good to think through some of, why that number is where it is. I'm just going to fly through this. There's a hard to reach report for customer assistance programs to look at, especially renters. There's some different ways to do this, but it can be tough. This link is in the chat, or in the slides. But I just want to make the point too that when somebody can apply, the sooner, the more likely it is that they will not be disconnected. And finally, just so important to evaluate whether your CAP is effective. You don't want to evaluate it after the first month, but set times, whether that's annually or quarterly, and look at is it doing what you set out to do? If not, what can you do? And tell me about it. Tell me about your customer assistance program, what you're doing. Are you doing what you want? And it might require other policies to change in order to meet those goals. So with that, I just want to encourage you, especially that small systems doesn't mean that there's no room for a customer assistance program. In fact, I've seen a lot of communities come, it can be a little bit more grassroots. For example, in Elkin, North Carolina, service population of 4,000, they have a bill payment assistance program. It was motivated during COVID, and citizens asked for a mechanism to donate. So these are people saying, hey, I want to donate for utility bill payment assistant. How can I do that? So they apply to a utility who sends it to this water committee, and they decided on a case-by-case basis. And in a survey we've done of customer assistance programs in North Carolina, that half of the customer assistance programs in North Carolina are with systems that are less than 10,000, and those are all across the board, not just bill payment assistant, but flexible terms, bill discount, a lot of different things. And with that, I'm just going to go back to my analogy from the beginning that this question of affordability is like a pile of spaghetti. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, a lot of different things to think about. And today we focused, customer assistance programs are not the silver bullet, but they are part of the suite of solutions. So with that, I'm going to leave a couple times for questions, and just want to thank especially those who have been here for multiple affordability webinars.
Great. Thank you so much, Elsa Marie. We did place in the chat a link to our technical assistance form. Like Elsa Marie said, small systems can also benefit from CAP. And if you do want to explore those options, that's something EFCN can work with you on. So feel free to learn more about our services by checking out that form on our website. Looking at our questions, we have a couple really interesting comments and questions coming through. So first, a CAP is especially important for renters since standard rental contracts require continuous utility service, and water service disconnection is a violation of the rental agreement and makes the tenant subject to eviction. Don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I would say that it's really good to know your renter's rights where you are, so you can tell from a utility standpoint, what is different states have different protections for renters, and so the report I linked links to some of that. But that's absolutely true that it can be pretty difficult to implement a customer assistance program for renters because they're not always the utility account owner. But there are different ideas, and I'm happy to talk more about that too.
Great, and a couple more coming in. So would the temporary assistance program be similar to or equivalent to a hardship program?
Oftentimes a hardship program is just another name for a kind of assistance program. Sometimes temporary assistance, especially the term hardship, can be used for, okay, you have a time limited kind of difficulty going on, we'll give you assistance once. So it might be equivalent, but I'd say check with the utility.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know of a CAP specifically for farmers?
I do not. No, I don't, but I would love to know if there is one.
Yeah, and maybe there's something like that more on our West Coast. We can check with our West Coast centers because that, Elsa Marie and we're both East Coast people and we have a lot of water here. So farmers aren't often, may not be as crunched as some of our other centers might know of. What is the smallest?
I would say a lot of the literature and a lot of the customer assistance programs that I've seen are focused on residential. So, and oftentimes, not always, but irrigation is a separate conversation, and there can be a customer assistance program absolutely geared toward that. But oftentimes the conversations are about residential customers.
Great. Okay, and then this question is, what is the smallest size of a town that you can use for the cost estimation tool?
Yeah, it's whatever like a census designated place would be. So if it's in the census website, then we can put that in there. And if it's not in the census website, we can ask you what you would estimate, you know, your MHI, your population to be, but it goes as small as any unit on the census website we can grab.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we are about to hit the top of the hour at 2. So just a couple reminders before we close. We will email a link to the recording and a follow-up email. You can always get in touch with us by emailing, replying to any of the emails you've received from us. And again, the handout section has a copy of the presentation for today. So all of the links, all of the video and the other things Elsa-Marie mentioned, that's immediately available, and feel free to download that before we close. Any other closing things you can think of, Elsa-Marie?
I would just say that I mentioned this briefly, but don't let, you know, initially low enrollment or difficulty setting up a customer assistance program stop you from giving it a shot. It's really hard to run a customer assistance program. It's not impossible. It can be done, and it can be done well, but I just say kind of set your expectations reasonably, and then look at a lot of different ways to address the issue of affordability. This is one tool in the toolbox. It's great, but keep in mind that there's a whole other tools as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Feel free to get in touch with questions, and we hope you enjoy your afternoon.